Matching supply and demand. This is the second module of the program and session number 2. This program is consisted of 2 modules and 1 special topic, as you can see from the table. The second module has 4 subsessions focusing on discussing supply chains. This is the second session of the second module. In this session, we will discuss one of the most critical topics in supply chain management, which is supply and demand. Actually, the most important goal of managing supply and demand is matching supply and demand. But we have an interesting problem here, which is called bullwhip effect. We will discuss this important and interesting problem during this session and finally explore some conceptual framework that describes different supply chain designs, depends on the type of demand or supply chain management strategy. Matching supply and demand is not easy. First, it is because of the complexity of supply side and its lead time, the time gap between order and actual delivery. Second, the demand is ever-changing moving target, thus hard to forecast the future demand. As a result, matching supply and demand is one of the most difficult tasks in managing supply chains. In terms of the flow of material, if the amount of supply is bigger than demand for some reasons, there will be extra inventories along the supply chain. Since the retail shop has normally limited space, even for display and sales, allocating extra space for inventory is such a waste and cost. In addition, sometimes the value of inventory diminishes as you cannot sell on the right time, resulting in maker down. On the other hand, if the demand is bigger than supply, there is a chance that you may lose the sales opportunity. Because of lack of available products on the retail site, customer may be able to buy what they want to. This can cause a customer dissatisfaction, resulting me even losing future sales opportunities because of the service level that cannot meet the customer's expectation. As a result, sometimes retailers may need to request a rush order that can cause the extra transportation cost and so on. Therefore, matching supply and demand is a big challenge. Due to the difficulty of matching supply and demand, some innovative companies trying to lead or create the demand rather than trying to meet the demand. Sometime you will see the note on the market saying that they will sell only limited amount of products or service in a day. By doing so, you only produce a limited amount of product or service by creating a situation of artificial scarcity of the supply. By doing so, they lead customers' anxiety so that they cannot defer their purchasing decision and no need to carry extra inventory. Some players may design very responsive supply chain. Although it might be very expensive, if there is customers who willing to pay the extra expenses in return of fast delivery, it may works well. We already discussed the difficulty of matching supply and demand. An interesting phenomenon in managing supply chain is not only mismatching, but also a kind of time gap of our reaction to the demand. As you can see from the graph, the dotted line represents the actual sales that has occurred, but the order placed by supply chain partner is mismatched. One scholar looked at this more in-depth level and found a very interesting and important problem as shown in the next slide. If you look at the graph A on the left upper corner, it is the actual sales at the retailer. It doesn't look like it has higher level of fluctuation, but based on the customer sales, number of retailers placed orders to wholesalers, as you can see on the graph B. Although this is the order received by a wholesaler from number of retailers, because one wholesaler takes care of number of retailers in general, it is quite different from the actual sales. Each retailer may react differently, but collectively their reaction has the higher level of fluctuation, as you can see. It gets worse as you move to manufacturer, as you can see from the graph C. The amount of orders from wholesalers to manufacturer shows higher level of fluctuation. Again, if you see the orders from manufacturers to raw material suppliers, the fluctuation is even more amplified. Toward to the customer, we call it as downstream of supply chain, and toward to the raw materials, we call it as upstream of supply chain. As we observed, as you go to the upstream of supply chain, the order fluctuation is getting worse and worse. This is what we call bullwhip effect. You must be familiar with the bullwhip. The bullwhip effect is a phenomenon in supply chain where orders from downstream to upstream suppliers tend to have a larger variability than actual sales to customers. If you shake the bullwhip, the end of bullwhip moves more dramatically than the part closer to your hand. This has been proved by collecting actual data from a company whose name is Barilla, a pasta production company. The scholars who found this phenomenon discussed that the potential cause of this phenomenon is the uncertainty of the demand and supply chain or lead time of supply chain response. Again, the phenomenon of bullwhip effect is that the order variability amplifies as you move up to the upstream of supply chain, resulting the upstream supply chain partner faces higher variability. Therefore, you cannot judge the actual sales or demand by looking at the order information that you receive in managing supply chains. So, why does it happen? There are some potential causes as follows. First, retailers changes or update their forecast based on the sales trend. For example, if the sales increase, retailer may think that the sales may increase continuously while the sales goes down in an opposite way. Because they do not want to miss any sales opportunity, they may add some more like 5% just in case. Each retailer add 5%, and this collectively added to the order to wholesaler, resulting in larger order than the actual sales. Second, it is expensive to place an order frequently because you have to fill out order form and take care of bank transaction, receive delivery, and so on. As a result, you may want to batch orders for a certain period, which makes upstream partners misinterpretation of the demand. Some retailers may want to buy products if they sense the price increase next week. There is no demand, but retailers create their own demand by placing an order to avoid purchasing at the higher price, and this provides a distorted information to upstream supply chain partners. It can happen when the demand is bigger than supply. Because the demand is bigger than supply, upstream partners equally or preferable allocate their inventories to downstream supply chain partners. This record becomes a historical data of order from the downstream partners and used for the future forecast. This is a very important point when we deal with information technology. Although there is a raw data, sometimes it does not reflect the reality of the supply chain activities. Lastly, when there is a shortage of supply, retailers may place an order multiple times or larger than expected demand, resulting in distorted information. As a result of the various reasons, companies in supply chains may end up having increased safety stock, reduced service level, inefficient allocation of resources, increased transportation costs, and ultimately huge waste. So, how do we reduce or avoid the bullwhip effect? One of the potential solutions could be information sharing among supply chain partners. Therefore, in the retail industry, they use the point of sales (POS) system. When you buy a goods from a retail shop, they scan your produce to check the price, but at the same time, your purchasing information is shared with upstream supply chain partners so that they can also have actual sale information at the retailer. In addition, to avoid any extra order because of the price fluctuation, some companies keep the year-round low pricing policy like Walmart in the USA. Another approach that we can take is to reduce the lead time of the supply chain using information technology like EDI and RFID, and also adopting advanced technology like cross-docking system and automated warehouse management system. Finally, there exists a strategic approach. By building a trust-based relationship with your supply chain partners, you can implement vendor-managed inventory. This means that you allow or ask your supplier manage your inventory by sharing information and building high level of trust-based partnership. Under this system, if you just share the POS data with your supplier automatically supply and fill the inventory for your business, resulting in saving respond time and ordering cost, or having an on-site vendor representatives so that she or he can manage your inventory. When we think about the supply chain management, we may need to consider the type of your business model related to the demand before you think about a specific supply chain design. It is entrepreneur's decision whether you want to position your business as taking care of broad or narrow product line. It also depends on whether you want to carry high value added service or low value added service. For example, Walmart in the USA positioned itself as taking care of broad product line and low value added service, while Bloomingdale's positioned itself as taking care of broad product line but high value added. Sunglass Hut focused on narrow produce line and provide low value added service compared to Tiffany that take care of narrow product line but high value added service. So before you design your supply chain, you may want to develop a strategic plan of your business model. Depends on the type of the business model that you select or develop, you can think about different types of supply chain designs. One potential framework of designing supply chains is shown on the slide. If you are taking care of innovative products, you can think about designing and developing responsive supply chain that has shorter response time, smaller inventory with small batch, and smaller minimum order quantity. Although it might be more expensive to set up a responsive supply chain, it can be available if your price tag for the innovative product can cover your supply chain expenses and still provide some profits. On the other hand, if you are dealing with functional products, you may want to think about designing efficient supply chain that has longer lead time, but enough inventory and cost efficient. If there is a mismatch, either you will have too expensive supply chain for the functional products or too slow supply chain for the innovative products. An interesting idea is to think about whether there is any opportunity to make my supply chain responsive but still efficient in terms of the cost. Maybe there is an opportunity that AI can make some contribution, and it is your interests and responsibility. During this session, we discussed how difficult it is to match the supply and demand and potential issues caused by mismatched supply and demand. In addition, we learned an interesting phenomenon which is called as bullwhip effect and its potential causes as well as consequences. Here, you will have tremendous opportunities that you can make a significant contribution in better managing supply chains by adopting AI technology. Finally, we discussed about the strategic approach to design your supply chain based on your business model and the characteristics of products that you are dealing with.